Welcome to the August 2026 edition of This Month in Payroll. I'm Claire Soccio, National Leader of PwC's Workforce Practice. In this month's edition, we'll focus on upcoming changes to the classification structure in modern awards, 2 recent decisions impacting the payment of superannuation guarantee, and key takeaways about sustained compliance from our recent forum with the Fair Work Ombudsman. Turning first to the significant classification structure changes coming out of the Fair Work Commission's gender-based undervaluation review. As a reminder, this is the Commission's own review initiated in 2024, examining whether classifications and minimum wage rates in 5 priority female-dominated awards have been the subject of gender-based undervaluation. The awards under review include the Health Professionals and Support Services, or HPSS, Children's Services, Social Community Healthcare and Disability Services, or SHADS, Pharmacy Industry, and Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Health Services awards. While we've touched on this review in previous editions, it is timely for discussion again because the next tranche of changes, affecting the classification structure for health professionals under the HPSS award, takes effect from 1 October 2026. These changes require considered planning to systematise. Firstly, the basis for classification is changing, not just the rate of pay. Each employee must be translated to a new classification referencing the Australian Qualifications Framework and their years of experience in the profession, and only then mapped to the new minimum pay rates. This may require consideration of data points not readily available for each employee, such as their qualifications, which may come from Australian or overseas institutes, years of experience at prior employers, and current duties and responsibilities. Payroll systems might need configuration changes to make sure that pay point movement is triggered correctly, including for part-time employees where the previous hours-based progression threshold has been removed. It's also worth checking that systems can produce date-driven records with the effective dates of classification changes or the applicable classification at specific historical dates. No employee's pay should go backwards. They're entitled to the higher of the new or previous rate. So a comparison is needed to confidently confirm that the new classification under the new framework from 1 October will deliver a higher rate of pay than the previous classification as at 30 September. The classification review process needs to accommodate that comparison rather than assuming that the new rate always applies. Annual rate increases will follow on 30 June each year through to 2030, and are separate and additional to annual wage review increases, so careful budgeting and workforce planning is appropriate. And lastly, employers with an enterprise agreement also need to confirm how their EA classifications map or translate to the new award structure before verifying that the base rates of pay are at least equivalent to those under the award. Similar changes are slated to impact SHADS employees from 1 October 2027, so employers should plan early to support compliance and a smooth transition. Now to a recent federal court decision that has generated considerable interest across the employment tax and payroll community, as it addressed a fundamental question about whether a salary loading allowance, akin to an annual leave loading payment, was considered to be ordinary time earnings, or OTE, and subject to superannuation guarantee. The salary loading allowance was paid to Victorian government school teachers at a rate equivalent to 17.5% on 4 weeks of a teacher's normal salary. Its origins date back to the 1970s, when it was introduced to give teachers an equivalent to the annual leave loading enjoyed by other public servants. Because teachers effectively take their annual leave during school holiday periods, rather than at a time of their choosing, the allowance was structured as a lump sum paid to those employed on a specific date each year. The dispute came down to whether that allowance formed part of teachers' OTE from 1 July 2008 onwards, and their notional earnings base before that date. The department was appealing amended superannuation guarantee charge assessments issued by the ATO covering the period from 2004 to 2022. The court found in the department's favour on both counts. For the pre-2008 period, it held the allowance was, in substance, a recreation leave allowance and therefore excluded from salary. For the post-2008 period, it held the allowance was not earnings in respect of ordinary hours of work. Its reasoning focused on the fact that the employee was only entitled to the payment if employed on a particular day, and that they would forfeit that payment if they resigned before that day. The court therefore considered it to be a separate annual lump sum and not a component of earnings for the performance of ordinary hours. The Commissioner of Taxation has already appealed this decision. So why does this decision matter? It's an important development in the interpretation of OTE and qualifying earnings, or QE, from 1 July 2026 for SG purposes, and therefore has potential significance beyond teachers or the public sector. That's because the court rejected the Commissioner of Taxation's long-standing default position that a payment is considered to be OTE, or now QE, unless it is specifically for non-ordinary hours, such as overtime. The court found no statutory basis for that approach and concluded that a payment isn't automatically OTE just because the employee doesn't have to work additional non-ordinary hours to receive it. Rather than applying a default position, the court concluded that each payment must be substantively characterised against the statutory definition, specifically considering whether the payment is earnings in respect of ordinary hours of work. This creates real tension with the Commissioner's current guidance in Law Companion Ruling LCR 2026/D1, which seeks to align QE under Payday Super to the previous default inclusion approach for payments that were OTE. This LCR will remain in draft pending the outcome of the appeal process. So what should employers be doing now? This is one to watch with careful interest. Any change to your current SG treatment of allowances, loadings or bonuses should not be made on the back of this decision alone, particularly as it is being appealed. The court's findings were heavily tied to the specific historical and industrial context of this allowance, and its application to payments like annual leave loading or bonuses is far from settled. We recommend you monitor this matter for the Commissioner's response and take specific advice from your employment tax specialist for any potential impact on material or unusual allowances. Staying on the theme of superannuation, a second decision worth a brief mention comes from the Fair Work Commission in AWU against Downer EDI Works. Here, Commissioner Fox held that Downer was required to make superannuation contributions for employees while they were taking portable long service leave, even though that leave was being paid for by the third-party portable LSL scheme, Leave Plus, and not directly by Downer EDI. A key factor in this decision was the wording of the enterprise agreement, which required super to be paid during paid leave. The Commission found that portable long service leave is paid leave and that it made no difference that the payment is administered through the third-party scheme rather than by the employer itself. The Commissioner also dismissed the relevance of an ATO interpretive ruling on this very point, given the obligation flowed from the enterprise agreement itself and not from the SG legislation. While the decision turns on the specific agreement, other employers subject to portable long service leave, and with enterprise agreements referring to super paid on paid leave, may consider confirming their obligations. Finally, a brief wrap-up of the key takeaways from our recent Workforce Leaders Forum on the theme of navigating sustained compliance. We heard directly from Phoebe Nicholas and Sally McLeod of the Fair Work Ombudsman about the regulator's reflections and expectations of employers. The central theme was that sustained compliance is an ongoing journey, not a one-off project, and not something that sits with payroll alone. As organisations grow, restructure and respond to legislative change, compliance frameworks have to keep pace. What was fit for purpose in the past may no longer sustain compliance in the future. The key points I took away include: compliance is a whole of organisation responsibility. Pay outcomes are shaped right across the employee lifecycle, from recruitment to onboarding, through to workforce planning, rostering, and enterprise bargaining. Every function needs to understand the role it plays. Employers must address root causes, not just symptoms. Too often the focus is on fixing historical underpayments without tackling the underlying drivers. Things like governance gaps, manual processes, under-resourcing, and inconsistent interpretation of industrial instruments. Compliance should be core to the business design, rather than bolted on afterwards. That's especially important during periods of change, such as bargaining or restructuring, where implementation, system impacts, and operational practicality should be considered early. And data and technology should be used strategically, but with human oversight and accountability. Technology and AI can support the effort, but they don't replace it. The message was to move beyond pay period exception reporting and use data to spot trends and emerging risks, while remembering that the organisation remains responsible for its inputs, assumptions, and outputs. And lastly, a point that resonated most. One of the most effective compliance controls is a genuine culture of challenge, an environment where people feel able to raise concerns and question decisions. If you weren't able to join us and are still interested to hear more about sustained compliance, you can watch the full forum on demand via our website. And that's it for our August edition of This Month in Payroll. If you would like to revisit any of our prior updates, they're available on our website at pwc.com.au/payroll. And if you have any questions or need for support, please reach out to myself or your usual PwC contact. Until next time, have a great month in payroll.